The Call of the Breach, Part 7.
DisastrousInvolvedI.
Disclaimer: the content presented in this video is purely fictional and intended for entertainment purposes only.
You've got your canteen, right? I glanced over Jamie's war belt, heart aching within my ribcage, her wry features shrouded in the hood of her overcoat. Jamie made a weary grin, and her words became fog in the morning sunlight. You asked that already. It was a cold sunrise, the grass glittered with a shiny coat of frost, but the wind from the night prior had died at last. I could see our breath in the air, swirls of steam that reminded me of tiny ghosts, flying away on the breeze. The huge camp lay quiet, much of the population still asleep after last night's tumultuous events, though various flying creatures sang from the nearby trees. Few of us had come to escort Jamie out the eastern gate. And while I was glad for the lack of a crowd, it hurt in the pit of my stomach that this was really happening. She had been the one to take me in at the start, taught me everything, and now Jamie Lonson would be jettisoned into the dark, cruel unknown of the forest, all alone. If she can make it to the water, she might stand a chance. That's assuming Vesitorak can't swim or build a boat. If he caught her, a hand on my arm made me jump, and I looked up to see her emerald green eyes watching me with resigned sadness. I'm going to be fine. Jamie shrugged, though the truth of her own reservations floated behind her thin smile. Seriously, it's not like we haven't done this before. Before it was temporary. I folded my arms to keep from shaking, both from the stiffness of the icy morning and my own deep-seated fear. And we were together. Where will you go? Jamie looked over her shoulder at the group that waited for us by the gate and flexed a set of fingers on the strap of her AK. Peter drew a map for me, said there's some small islets on Maple Lake that should be good for building a hideout. I figure if I can knock together a canoe or something, I can live off fish and gulls for a while, maybe drop a few deer for winter. All I gotta worry about then is not freezing to death. Her weak expression faded at that, and Jamie stroked a small woodcutting axe that I'd bought for her from the market after the trial. No doubt thinking about how much work she'd have to do just to keep a fire going through the snowy months. The Ark River folks had mountains of firewood stacked within our walls, but even then, they burned sparingly, as we all knew the winter would likely be rougher than usual thanks to the breach. She doesn't even have a proper tent. Building a hut that can withstand the winter could take days, maybe weeks, and if the inland sea freezes over, she won't be able to fish without hacking deep holes through the ice. If Jamie can't get enough calories, she won't be able to keep warm, and then, in stubborn horror at my own thoughts, I shook my head to dig in my war belt pouch. I've got some more cartridges. Why don't you take them? And Jamie closed her hand over mine to keep the bullets where they were. I've got enough. Seriously, hang on to your ammo. You're going to need it. At that, we both glanced toward the distant motor pool, where the fleet of armored trucks and other vehicles lay in wait. Ethan's crew had spent a good portion of the night after the trial had ended getting them ready. Soon we would drive from the fort with every fighter we could spare, and lunge northward to do battle with Elsa directly. Our success could bring an end to the war. Our failure, on the other hand, would mean certain death. A cold chill ran up my arms, leaving goosebumps on the skin beneath my coat sleeves. And I tugged my hood closer around my face. I wish you were coming with us. Jamie winked and took my arm to steer us toward the gate. You'll be all right. I've got faith in you. There's not a bullet made yet that can catch Hannah the mutant killer. I chuckled, though my heart wasn't in it, and we strode on to where the others waited. First on the way, Sarah met us, and handed each a handheld yellow plastic box with a metal antenna in the end. Here. Our technicians rigged these up from some civil defense surplus radios we scrounged months ago. They spliced in some tiny solar panels in the back from old outdoor patio lights, so it can trickle charge during the day. It's not great. But it should allow you to call from several miles away at least, and that way you can keep tabs on each other. Her expression was one of remorse as she held one of the radios out to Jamie, and from the redness around Sarah's eyes, I could tell she'd been crying. Her faction already had a nasty reputation thanks to Sarah's predecessor, Dr. O'Brien, turning traitor, and Sarah still dealt with the fallout of that to this day. Being on the panel that convicted Jamie had earned her a few more enemies, and I could tell that she hadn't felt good about it. Scientist or no, Sandra was still a human being, and this horrible war had taken its toll on her as much as it had the rest of us. With that in mind, I accepted my radio with a grateful nod. Thank you. Jamie slipped hers into her pack and flashed Sarah a debonair grin. Here's to hoping I use it a lot, yeah? Here's to hoping. From behind Sarah came Sean, his movie star handsome face reddened with the morning's chill. He too wore an expression that bordered on regret, though his was more stoic, and Sean offered out a bundle wrapped in scrapcloth. Pulled some jerky from the ration stores for you, and some potatoes. Should get you through 4 or 5 days at least, enough for you to get a decent shelter rigged up. Somewhat surprised, Jamie's face flushed, and she cradled the food in her arms with a meek nod. I'll build a guest room for you then, boss? His stony countenance slipped a little at her plucky humor, and Sean winced. I wish it didn't have to be this way, Lonson. You've done what you had to. She met his eyes with a generous tone and angled her head toward the rows of tents and cabins within the walls. Someone's got to lead these people, after all. Randy would be proud. Sean's mouth twitched into a sad half-smile. Bill would be too. A long moment lapsed between them, like ice frozen in the air. Her eyes glistened with crystalline emotion, and Jamie snapped her free arm into a rigid salute. It was an honor, sir. At that, Sean's dark irises watered, but he returned a salute of his own and let us move on down the line. Ethan had a compass for her that he'd salvaged from an old travel van. Eve gifted her a small pouch for Jamie's war belt that was filled with little medical vials of lantern rose nectar, and Adam handed her a fishing pole that could be broken down into 3 short pieces for storage. Peter of course gifted the handmade map from the Harper's Vengeance and teased Jamie with his famous coin-in-the-ear trick one last time. Like the others, they each expressed their sympathies for the terrible situation we'd all been forced into, and Jamie graciously did her best to wave off the obvious sadness we all felt. Last to meet us before the tall iron facets of the eastern gate stood Chris, with the slanted golden rays of the rising sun to his right. Chris seemed stuck to the spot, his scruffy face ringed with dark bags under his sky-blue eyes. Maple syrup-colored hair stood up in places from where he'd tossed and turned all night same as I had. Despite all this, he was as handsome as the first day we'd met, and I could tell it wasn't lost on Jamie either for how she jolted to a halt in her tracks, their eyes locked. The brave veneer of faux indifference wavered on Jamie's pixie-like features, and pain flickered there, dredged up from wounds that had never fully healed. She needs this. Jamie deserves to say whatever she has to. She did it for me, after all. I gave her a gentle nudge forward, and made a warm smile at her uncertain glance to let her know it was all right. Go on. It's okay, really. I'll wait here. Her lower lip trembled, but Jamie slowly trudged over to Chris and set her backpack down on the ground beside her. Chris opened his mouth to speak, then shut it again, dropping his gaze to his boots. It hurt to see them like this, not in the old jealous way I'd felt before I knew the truth, but in the agonizing torture of watching my 2 best friends suffer from the scars of their past. There was nothing I could do to make it better, I knew that, and remained a respectful distance away with a silent prayer on my lips that somehow they might find a sense of peace. So Jamie tried to clear her throat, unable to meet Chris's eye. I guess this is. Without a word, Chris pulled her into a fierce embrace, and Jamie shattered like glass. Even from where I stood, I could see her shoulders quake from the sobs, and Chris's stoic face moist with rare tears. They clung to each other in a heart-rending despair that I couldn't feel threatened by for how hopeless it was, the last dying gasps of a dream that was never meant to be. Their whispers were likely inaudible to the others, but with my advanced hearing, I picked up every word. I heard you're going south. He offered the words like a flag of truce from behind a barricade. That's smart, the water will make being stealthy easier. Maybe you can head west for Sunbright. And try to slip past the border guards when the fog sets in. Jamie laughed, though it was barely a chuckle between heartbroken sniffles. You aren't getting rid of me that easy. I'll stick it out somewhere on the lake. Build myself a mansion on the waterfront and get fat on wild ducks. Chris paused, his frown one of deep reservation. Jamie, don't. She hugged him tighter, and something in Jamie's voice cracked with the finality of her circumstances, a knowledge that there would be no turning back from this. I'm not leaving, not like that. You wouldn't, so don't you dare lecture me now. More quiet tension reigned, and from how it rendered through their body language. Gee, I sensed something rising, like an ancient volcano whose eruption was long overdue. I'm sorry. Chris breathed with a defeated note in his soft accent, both eyes squeezed shut. Me too. Jamie rested her head on his shoulder, her face buried in the thick lapel of Chris's jacket. From behind the folds of my coat hood, I felt the corners of my mouth turn slightly upwards, even if the effort was in mourning. There it was, after all this time. I knew it wasn't merely an apology for the trial, or the incident with Dr. O'Brien. This was deeper, stemming back to more than I knew, to hurts and betrayals that predated me in this forgotten place. For so long they'd held those scars against each other. And at last, both seemed willing to let it go. Chris and Jamie held each other in silence for a few seconds, before they broke apart, each wiping at their face with their coat sleeves. As she picked up her pack, I caught Chris's eye over Jamie's shoulder, and he gave me a grateful nod. My heart both twinged in pain and soared for how he looked at me, knowing then that I'd done the right thing. Chris was mine, had been from the start, but he'd needed to find that closure with Jamie for a long time. At least now, whatever came next, he might not feel as guilty. At the end of the lane, only Jamie and I remained, under the shadow of the gate. I had done everything to prepare myself for this moment. But now that it was here, a weight of grief settled over me in a cascade of brutal intensity. She flexed her neck to crack it, and Jamie turned to face me with a shuddery breath. "Call you when I get there, then?" "It sounds so much worse when you say it like that." I flung my arms around her, and Jamie gripped me so tight I thought my ribs would snap, our tears soaking each other's shoulders. "If you go out there and die on me, I'll kick your ass." "Sure you will." Jamie giggled and pulled back to hold my gaze, with a nod back to where Chris watched us. "Take care of him. He might be a pretentious fool at times, but he's still a great guy, and he'd be lost without you." A ghost of a smile tried to play about my lips, but another thought struck me, and I turned to rummage around in my deep jacket pockets. There is one more thing. From within the oversized Carhartt, I produced the photograph of her and her brother, Bill. However, the frame now also had another picture taped to the side of it, a glossy black Polaroid I'd gotten at my surprise birthday party all those nights ago in New Wilderness, showing Jamie and I laughing on the dance floor together. "I saved this for you, back in New Wilderness. Now wherever you go, I go." Jamie's eyes swam with fresh tears, and she choked back a wave of emotion to shake her head at me. "Why, you're too good for this awful place." We embraced one final time, and Jamie clutched the picture with a white-knuckled grip. "Thank you, Hannah," she whispered. I watched her go, my heart tearing in two as the heavy gates swung shut behind her with a solemn thud. Just before she reached the distant trees, Jamie turned once to look back our way, and then the forest swallowed her up. Chris's hand worked into mine, and I turned to rest my head against his shoulder, fighting the urge to break down all over again. "She'll be fine," he grunted, though I sensed it was just as much to himself as to me. "Jamie is smart. I'm sure we'll hear from her within a few days." "And if she runs into Vesatorak? Or a pack of birch crawlers? We'd never know." "Never hear the screams, not find so much as her shoes to bury, Decker, Brun." Sean's voice snapped me from my droll thoughts as the others dispersed. "We've got a conference in my tent in 5 minutes. I need you both there." Chris gave my hand a squeeze, his breath warm on my ear. "Ready?" I looked at the gate, a small part of me wishing it would open, and Jamie would come strolling back inside with a quirky grin on her face to say it was all a practical joke. My world had changed again with the extinction. Another part of it that I loved, needed, depended on every day. First it was my home, my parents, even Matt and Carla. Now, I'd lost Jamie, New Wilderness lay in ruins, and we were about to march to war. I had no idea if I would even come back from it, if a shell, bullet, or grenade would cut me down somewhere in the northern section of Barron County. My entire life, what was left of it, hung in the balance. A cool breeze sprung up to slide its invisible fingers through my hair, a few strands of gold playing amongst the brown before my eyes. "You were different, Hannah." The stranger in the chemical suit's words floated through my mind again, calming my nerves, soothing the pain in my chest, giving me purpose. I wouldn't let this sacrifice be in vain. Jamie believed in me, she always had. If I could find a way to stop whatever calamity awaited us all beyond fate's horizon, then I would give my life to do so. For her sake, gripping Chris's palm in mine, I nodded and turned my back on the eastern gate. "Let's go."
Until next time, subscribe to stay up to date with all updates. No screamers or shocking moments, only comfort and safety. Bye.